revealing the handling of the Xingtian Tomb incident by Bureau, file number 1979012, file name Xingtian Tomb incident, top secret, on January 22, 1979, 12 archaeologists, in front of a tomb in Erniang Mountain, encountered an emergency, none survived. There were video materials, corpses and related traces and other evidence. On January 25, 1979, a regiment stationed there designated Erniang Mountain for on-site protection. On January 27, 1979, this incident was handed over to, and the Special Operations Team of the Bureau. My name is Wu Jiangguo. I was a soldier, but my later experience, my file also became a dusty secret, and in the file I was already dead. But I am still alive. But I am not a complete person. In my lifetime, it is impossible to become complete. Now my body is getting worse and worse, and my life may be coming to an end. But the stories I have experienced I don't want to be buried in the dust of history. So I wrote down the following words, merely to record my life. I remember it was a battle in 1978. Only I survived among those who were in charge of rear guard. I persisted until the end. I fainted due to lack of physical strength. When I woke up, a deputy commander came to see me in person. After asking about my physical condition, he asked me carefully, on the battlefield at that time, if there were any special circumstances. I was confused. I said I didn't know, but the deputy commander told me at this time, he found dozens of all of whom died with their heads bursting. This feeling was like an explosion inside the head. Since then, because I was found to have special telekinetic abilities, I was transferred to the 749 Bureau. The file simply stated that Wu Jiangguo is suspected to be a psychic. With abnormal brain waves, he can interfere with the enemy's brain with his mind, with a very strong ability. All this shows that the Bureau of 749 is unusual. After joining the 749 Bureau, the familiar people I met was actually a general who had died many years ago. He is now the captain of the Special Operations Team. From that moment on, Captain Zhang became my big leader, and I also had a new name, Invincible. So I officially started my new career in Bureau 749. I was exposed to one horror and bizarre, terrifying and bizarre supernatural events. One day in early January 1979, the leader of the first team summoned all the team members. This was also the first mission I had experienced. A video was played in the meeting room. People in the video seemed to be digging something, and in front of them, there seemed to be the gate of an ancient tomb. When they were about to open the ancient tomb door, the door opened by itself. Several shadows flew by. Due to the pixel issue, we couldn't see clearly what they were, but then, all the archaeologists twitched and fell to the ground, and slowly stopped moving. But the picture continues. After a while, a huge snake with two large tumors on its back came out of the wooden door. Judging from the proportion of the snake and the person in the shot, the snake was about 1.5 times as thick as a person, about 10 meters long. There was no more clue after that. The film ended here. Everyone was silent, and seemed to be waiting for Lin Zhen's next instructions. At this time, Liu Meng, who is usually outgoing, said, "Isn't this just a snake with cancer? Just ask the local soldiers to catch it." Liu Meng joined the 749 Bureau earlier than me. Of course, Liu Meng is just a code name, and his real name is also a secret. Later we enlarged the video. We could barely see a few shadows, and we couldn't see anything else. After all, the image quality is there. According to the autopsy report, the victims all died of poisoning, and there were small tooth marks on their bodies, which looked like bites from some kind of venomous snake. For this report, we didn't have much doubt. After all, a very strange snake appeared at the scene. Everyone knows that snakes are poisonous, is a very basic understanding. So for the poisoning and death, there was no much reaction. From the video footage, the current situation is as follows. A huge snake appeared at the scene, plus a creature with the ability to fly, and a strange creature with highly poisonous. And it should be very fast. Erniang Mountain is located on the border of Yunnan, with very inconvenient transportation. It took us nearly 2 days to finally arrive. When we arrived at Erniang Mountain, the surrounding area of dozens of miles had been sealed off. The commander in charge was a colonel named Tai. Due to the secrecy, the commander didn't know the specific details. He only knew something incredible had happened in Erniang Mountain and killed many archaeologists. Hai's order was to cordon off the scene, waiting for the arrival of the special mobile team of Bureau 749, and then do a good job of coordinating. Hai's mission is to provide manpower and firepower, and do his best to ensure the safety of the team. So, Captain Tai handed over the command to Lin Zhen. That night, we were at the army's station. We discussed the itinerary for the next day. It was obviously inappropriate for everyone to go in. After discussion, we decided to explore the ancient tomb, including me. There were 5 people. Then Lin Zhen asked the Iron Leader for 5 soldiers to be responsible for vigilance and transportation. So there were 10 of us in total. The number was neither too large nor too small, which was just right. At night, when I was about to fall asleep, I suddenly felt a little dizzy, and this feeling of dizziness seemed familiar, but this time there was no explosion. Instead, a voice emerged in my mind. "I am the Guardian. You mortals, leave quickly." Just this sentence, repeated many times in my mind. I looked around. There was only the rustling of trees and grass. There was no other sound. Combined with my dizziness just now, I knew this was probably the effect of my mind. Maybe something was using my brainwaves to talk to me. I quickly ran into the tent. I woke up Lin Zhen and told him what I had experienced just now. However, after thinking for a long time, we had no answer, so we didn't think about it anymore. The morning action team officially set off. In addition to the necessary exploration and photography equipment, we also carried a large amount of serum and antidote to prevent unknown dangers. Our strategic goals of this operation mainly include 2. One is to find out the truth about the snake and the shadow, and the second is to explore what is in that tomb. We walked for about an hour. We finally saw the ancient tomb in the video. The door of the tomb was still only a slit, which looked dark and eerie. Liu Meng and I were about to unload the equipment. Boss Lin suddenly waved to us to look at the ground. I looked down. There were 2 long marks at the entrance of the tomb. If the tumor snake ran out of the tomb, there should only be 1 trace on the ground. Now there are 2 marks. There are only 2 explanations. One is that there are 2 snakes in the tomb, or the big snake ran back to the tomb by itself. The scene was badly damaged. It is impossible to tell if there is 1 or 2, but in either case, it is very dangerous. If the snake returns to the tomb is full of dangers. Everyone fell into silence again. Boss Lin thought that the situation inside is not very clear. He and Liu Meng led 2 soldiers to go in and see. Wei Peng and I stayed outside to protect the others. The 4 of them changed into protective suits, and also prepared flamethrowers and other equipment. Then they flashed into the dark ancient tomb gate. Wei Peng and I spread out to guard at the tomb door. About a quarter of an hour later, there was a scream behind me. I turned around sharply, and saw a soldier had fallen, and a dark shadow was floating beside him. I was shocked by this sudden change, and broke out in a cold sweat. On closer inspection, this shadow turned out to be a small snake, with a pair of small wings on its back. I don't know where these flying snakes came from. No wonder it is so agile. Plus its toxicity. It is really a silent killer. I immediately shouted. Everyone came into the tomb. Everyone quickly retreated into the tomb. Wei Peng and another soldier used geo and protective suits to temporarily block the gaps in the tomb. Only then did we breathe a sigh of relief. I couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. I turned on the light and started to look around. The tomb was very simple. Perhaps it was not the core of the tomb. In the visual range of the naked eye, there were no burial objects. The murals have also peeled off almost. The tomb is not wide, but it is deep. Lin and his team must have explored deep into the tomb. I judge the current situation. It is better to meet with Lin as soon as possible. After all, someone has already sacrificed. I discussed my thoughts with everyone. Everyone agreed that we should go inside to meet the predecessors. After making up our minds, we continued to move forward to deal with sudden dangers. Wei Peng led the way. I was second. Biologist Duan Feng and Dr. Dong Feng were third and fourth. Another soldier stayed behind. In this way, our group began to explore the tomb deeper. We had to be on guard along the way, snakes with wings attacking us. After advancing for a while, I found that the carving of the tomb was not smooth enough, and even a little rough, but luckily, there was no danger. After walking for a while, I suddenly felt more sensitive. I felt a unique signal in my brain. It was the instinct to sense danger. Wei Peng, who has experienced many battles, obviously noticed it. We signaled the team to stop and formed a circle to be on guard. But nothing seemed to happen, and there was no sign of any living creature approaching. Maybe we were too sensitive. I was about to raise my hand to signal to disarm. I suddenly found that my comrades were gone. Wei Peng and others who were just back to back with me had disappeared into the tomb passage. I rubbed my eyes to confirm this fact. I was about to shout loudly. I suddenly heard a shrill cry. Lao Wu, where are you? This was the voice of medical staff Dongfang, and I could hear that he was very close to me. I ran towards the direction of the voice. Then I bumped into something, with a series of collisions, and there were screams. These voices were from our group, but I couldn't see anyone. I trembled and asked if they could see me. I am Woody. They all said they couldn't see me. I was sure now. We were actually still in the same place. What I hit just now was my comrade. Not only couldn't I see them, but they couldn't see me either. I signaled them to calm down. After I told them the current situation, I touched them one by one. After confirming the positions of the other 4 people, to prevent accidents, I pulled them together. At this time there seemed to be some kind of induction, which was the same as the feeling just now. A terrifying thought emerged from my mind. I think we were being blinded by something. I thought for a moment. I thought it was still dangerous to stay there, because there must be something strange nearby. So I asked everyone to hold hands, and continued to walk deeper into the tomb. About 2 minutes later, I noticed some changes in the tomb passage. The originally rough tomb passage seemed to have become smoother, and there were some strange patterns. I tried to observe those patterns, trying to get some clues from them. So I stood on tiptoe, one hand holding a flashlight, and started to touch the patterns with the other hand, trying to wipe off the dust on it. Just as I touched the pattern, I felt something seemed to stick to my hand. I thought it was just dust. I unconsciously increased the force. I felt a soft sensation in my hand. Then there were a few flapping sounds. A mural suddenly cracked and flew away. I instantly picked up my gun and was ready to fire. Oh my god, it was a phantom moth. Duanfang behind me seemed to see this scene. He said in a surprised tone. Duanfang went around me, began to observe the thing flying in the sky. Of course, this was just my feeling at the time, because my vision hadn't recovered yet. Okay, the problem has been clarified. The reason why we couldn't see is all because of this phantom moth. Duanfang's certain voice came from the front. This moth has been recorded, but then it disappeared. There has been no record of a living one being found. In the records, the phosphor powder of this moth can change people's vision, making people only see monochromatic things. Wash your eyes with water and wash off the phosphor powder. We quickly took out the water bottle we carried and wash our eyes with clean water. Sure enough, my vision began to recover. At this time, I took a closer look. There were densely lying on the tomb passage. Where are all these moths? Dongfang suddenly cried out. Look! There were patterns where the moths were lying. I quickly went to check. Sure enough, there were patterns. It should be a mural or something like that. The information on it is very important for our exploration. Is very important. I looked at the densely packed moths on the wall. I made up my mind. Wei Peng and another soldier heard my order and directly picked up the flamethrower to burn them, and we also put on gas masks to prevent being affected by the moths again. The moths felt the heat of the flame and scattered in all directions. Finally, the tomb wall was cleared. We could see the pictures on the tomb wall clearly. These murals are obviously of long history, and many places are in disrepair, and some are falling off, but we can still see them clearly. The mural depicts such a story. In an ancient tribe, their chief was a peerless warrior. His weapon was a large axe and a large shield, and where the chief fought, there was always a strange snake by his side. The snake had 2 wings on its back. The man and the snake were invincible on the battlefield, and won one victory after another. Later, the tribal chief led the entire tribe to participate in a battle. Before the battle, the chief actually made a gesture like holding the snake, as if he was explaining something to the snake, and then the man and the snake into the battle. The battle was very fierce. The warriors behind the chief fell one after another. Subsequently, only the chief and the snake beside him were still fighting. But at this moment, it can be seen that the chief's physical strength and energy had reached their limit. Several murals in the middle are somewhat damaged, and it is hard to see what happened. Next, a headless corpse is fighting with a big axe. From the patterns on the body, it can be seen that This headless corpse is the tribal chief in the previous mural. At this time, the flying snake has disappeared. Only the headless chief was left fighting. He still killed countless enemies with his axe. Then he also fell down. At this time the flying snake appeared again. It wrapped the headless body around, and then rolled it up and flew away. The story depicted in the mural ends here. We looked at this bizarre story, looked at each other, because the scene described in this story resembles the ancient mythological stories. Xingtian got a shield and a large axe. These elements are all possessed by the legendary Xingtian. Could it be that this ancient tomb is related to the mythical Xingtian? Or this is the place where Xingtian was buried? Just as, while we were still struggling with this story, in the deeper part ahead, a burst of gunfire came from ahead. I immediately led the way to the depths of the tomb, and asked Dongfang to keep contacting them. This time, the walkie-talkie finally worked. It seems that we are very close to them. We heard Lu Meng's hysterical voice on the walkie-talkie. I said, "Comrade Wu, if you don't come, we will all go to see our ancestors." Hearing this, we all quickened our pace. Then a different voice came from the walkie-talkie. It was Captain Lin Zhen. "You don't need to come. Retreat all, never come in again." Lin Zhen's voice was very firm. I understand. They must have encountered an unsolvable problem, and they believed that even if we went, it wouldn't help the overall situation. I looked around at the other 4 teammates. My reason told me that continuing forward would likely lead to our annihilation. But if we retreat here, it would also be a loss for the subsequent troops. So I made a decision. Wang Shun orders you to protect Dongfang. Retreat first, after leaving the tomb. Tree to rendezvous with Captain Tai, and come to rescue us. The soldier under Wei Peng didn't complain either, and accepted the task very readily. Then he pulled Dongfang over, and started to retreat towards the entrance of the tomb. The gunshots were getting closer, and our hearts were in our throats. In front of the tomb passage, there was another door. It seems that Lin Zhen and his team were behind the door. Wei Peng and I formed a battle formation, and we both slipped to the sides of the door. Then I saw Lin Zhen's figure. The 4 people who entered the tomb, only Lin Zhen and Liu Peng were left. The other 2 soldiers had already died of poisoning. Only then did I see the current situation. Lin Zhen and Liu Meng. We're dealing with the dense flying snakes. Some of them were quite large. Their bodies were upright, and float in the air with their wings. So it gives people the feeling as if they were standing. I held my gun and cautiously kept watch, to prevent them from suddenly launching an attack. Duan Feng was faithful to his duty, took out his camera and started taking pictures of these snakes, to leave extremely real video materials. Just then a buzzing sound came from behind the 2 relatively large flying snakes, and then a group of small flying snakes flew out from the gap behind the tomb came out. These little snakes were not big. Similar to the kind we encountered at the entrance of the tomb, our faces changed, because we all know that this kind of small flying snake is highly toxic, and their speed is also extremely fast. At such a high speed, it was very difficult to solve them with guns. At this time the group of little flying snakes began to move. Their moving speed was really fast, just like a group of shadows, and instantly rushed towards us. Lu Meng's flamethrower couldn't hit them. Lin Zhen and I were also firing desperately. The situation didn't change much. We were still at a disadvantage. Suddenly, I felt the air was a bit heavy. It was like being glued to the air. My movements and thinking became slow. At this time, I was surprised to find that the little flying snakes that I couldn't see clearly now moved very slowly, although they were faster than us. But I could definitely see them clearly. I immediately picked up my gun. I shot at these little snakes with a high hit rate. After a burst of shooting, there were not many little flying snakes left around us. At this time I noticed that Captain Lin Zhen's eyes had turned blood red, and his body was also trembling. It was obvious that Captain Lin Zhen caused the situation. This should be his special ability. Can limit the movement of creatures, or slow down their speed. Later I learned that Lin Zhen's ability is to adjust the flow of time. Taking advantage of this gap, Wei Peng and I pulled Liu Meng and Lin Zhen behind us, giving them a chance to catch their breath. Captain Lin Zhen released his ability. He gasped for breath, and he couldn't even stand steadily. It seems that such ability is too much of a burden on his body. The flying gods resumed their actions and buzzed towards us again. No, we can't die. At that time I only had one belief in my heart. I must try my best to save them. At this time, the familiar headache came again. The flying snake in front also stopped moving. Snap! A small flying snake burst directly, turning into a pool of flesh and blood on the ground. Then, all the little flying snakes that charged ahead burst, and I was dizzy and unbearable, and fell into a coma. When I opened my eyes, Lu Meng's big face first came into view. I tried my best to open my eyes, trying to see things more clearly around me, but my vision was still a little blurry. Despite this, I could see clearly. We were sitting in the middle of the tomb, and around us, we're surrounded by winged flying snakes. These flying snakes were of different sizes. Their state seemed to be ready to launch an attack at any time, but they didn't act rashly. On the other side of the tomb, a huge snake was sitting there, with 2 huge warts hanging on the ground on its back. This snake looked very old, because even its eyes were covered with white smoke. I suddenly realized the tumors on the back of the snake might be wings. This big snake is actually a flying snake, but due to the passage of time, its wings have degenerated into tumors. I stared at the snake, and the snake stared at me like that. I didn't expect to see his descendants here. A hoarse voice emerged from my mind. That feeling, as if someone was talking directly in your head. I hurriedly looked around to see who was talking. Suddenly, I found a big snake staring at me. Are you talking to me? I wasn't sure. It is me. When you came here, I warned you not to come here, but you still came. A hoarse voice emerged in my mind again. This time I was sure. The one who was talking to me through brain waves was the snake with tumors in front of me. And at the time at the station, he was the one talking to me. You are the guardian. This time I didn't speak, but asked him directly in my mind. Yes, I am the guardian. I calmed down and asked cautiously, who are you and who are you protecting? I am Tengshi. Eyes for the person I am protecting. You can see it. After the snake finished speaking, in my mind, strange pictures suddenly appeared in my mind. I knew this should be the memory of the snake. At that time, the snake was still a little snake. It was lying on the ground, weak and powerless. Under his body, there was a very deep scar. A figure slowly approached and gently picked up the little snake. The chief took the snake back home and took care of it carefully. The little snake quickly recovered and it began to hover around the chief. It can fly. Let's call you Tengshi. From then on, Tengshi lived with the chief and fought together. One day, the chief suddenly said to Tengshi, I am going to participate in a very harsh battle, and there is a high chance of dying there. You go and live a good life. Tengshi didn't want to leave, and the chief had no choice, so he had to take him with him. The battle took place in a mountain. The chief's companions fell one after another. Then the enemy's general appeared. Tengshi heard the enemy call the general emperor. The man swung his sword horizontally, and the chief's head rolled down with a vertical swing of his sword, and the whole mountain was split open. Then the chief's head was caught in the middle of the mountain, and couldn't move. Tengshi was very anxious, but he was helpless. He was no match for the other general. Just then, the chieftain suddenly stood up again. The headless corpse continued to fight. When the body passed by Tengshi, the navel of the corpse suddenly spoke, take me away, and go back to our tribe. The scene changed. The headless body fell down again. Tengshi wrapped the corpse with its tail and flew away. The chief's tribe built a tomb for him. The wolf snake also lived in the tomb to guard his chief. The scene ends here. I knelt on the ground, breathing heavily. The captain of the spirit formation saw me kneeling on the ground, and immediately came forward to help me up. I told them what I had seen, and their faces were all filled with shock. After all, the flying snake was also a legendary creature. But soon they accepted this reality, because the flying snake in front of them, isn't it the characteristic of the flying snake? He let me see his memories. The person he guarded was wielding a shield and axe. Even if his head was taken off, still fighting. I showed them the memory that Tengshi showed me, and they described it. Everyone realized that this was the tomb of Xingtian. It was no longer a place we should set foot in. Captain Lin asked me to tell Tengshi we would leave immediately, asking him to let us go, and Tengshi agreed to my request. But he actually wanted to borrow my head. After hearing what Tengshi said, I instinctively wanted to draw my gun. But I slowly put down the gun in my hand. This is the only chance. Sacrifice me, to let everyone get out safely. So I calmly told Tengshi I agreed to his request. Since my communication with Tengshi are all carried out in my mind, Lin Zhen and the others didn't know what we were talking about. So I told them that they could leave. I agreed, but I would stay to help him. The captain was silent for a moment, walked up to me and said, "Woody, you must be careful." After that, they slowly retreated, and the small snakes didn't chase after them, just quietly watched them leave. After they all withdrew from the tomb passage, I took a deep breath. I walked forward. I said to the Tengshi, "You can take my head away." The snake tilted its head and said in a puzzled, hoarse voice, "What do I want your head for? I want to borrow your ability." I haven't heard his voice for a long time. I took a deep breath. I thought to myself, just say it directly, "To borrow my ability." "You have to borrow my head," I said helplessly. "How can I help you?" Hearing Xingtian's voice, Tengshi thought for a moment and said, "I don't know, but I want to try." I was silent, but somehow, I especially wanted to help the legend in front of me. So I said to Tengshi that I could try. "Connect your spirit with Xingtian's, to see if you can communicate." Tengshi nodded and started to move deeper into the tomb. I followed him, but the little ones still stayed where they were. In the center of the tomb, there was a stone coffin. Tengshi looked at the sarcophagus devoutly, as if it had made up its mind, and used its big tail to open the lid of the sarcophagus, and motioned me to come over. I walked forward. A sense of majesty and solemnity lingered in my mind. I saw a headless body that still hadn't rotted. It was lifelike, and I seemed to feel that this body still has a will. I exerted my mind power to connect my spirit with the Tengshi. Then I focused all my mind power, focused on the body in front of me, to capture the will that existed in the body. When his will and my mind power intersect, a solemn voice come from my mind. "Tengshi, long time no see. Friend, long time no see." Tengshi's hoarse voice also came over. After a conversation, Xingtian's will dissipated. After thousands of years, the residual will, perhaps in the conversation with the honest Tengshi, was redeemed. I turned my head. I found the old Tengshi also shed cloudy tears. He is a snake, but he has practiced for thousands of years, and already has his own joys and sorrows. I walked forward, and I didn't know what to say. Tengshi looked at me, and a hoarse voice emerged from his mind again. "You can go, thank you, but could I make one more request? My life is coming to an end, but my descendants, I beg you not to hurt them. I promise they won't leave here." I thought about it. I said to him solemnly, "No one will disturb you." Just as I was about to leave, Tengshi suddenly said, "You can take this away. I guess Xingtian probably doesn't want this thing buried here." After that, the snake used its tail to open the sarcophagus, and a box next to it, containing a shield and an axe. I think these should be Xingtian's weapons. Ganqi many people think that Ganqi is a weapon, but in fact they are two weapons, a shield and an axe. I was very excited, because weapons like this with special features are very popular in Bureau 749, and an important part. I picked up the shield and the axe. I sensed their will from between them. Although they are weapons, they also have their own will. Then a warm current began to linger in my hands, and then to my mind. At this moment, I felt the weight of the shield and axe decrease. They were adapting to my physique. From this moment on, they officially recognized me as their master. When I walked out of the tomb, I looked back at Tengshi. I felt like I was looking at an old man dying. But such an old man may be happy after fulfilling the only wish in his life before he passed away. When I walked out of the ancient tomb, the dazzling sunlight shone on me, which made it hard for me to open my eyes for a while. When I arrived at the camp, I reported everything that happened in the tomb. I reported to Captain Lin Zhen. The next day, Lin Zhen called the headquarters in Beijing and reported the situation to Captain Zhang. Then, according to the instructions from headquarters, we could all evacuate. Later, the superior issued an order. A military control zone was set up in Erniang Mountain and controlled by the local. This is also a normal means. Later, I also handed over the collected dry lacquer to the organization for research. After the Erniang Mountain incident, we also had a short break. But on January 28th, the day before New Year's Eve, a messenger suddenly came. Comrade Woody, the superior orders you to the third meeting room." Hearing the words of the messenger, my heart sank to the bottom. Going to the meeting room, which means there is a new mission.